The evening sun was setting over Chicago as Michael Scofield walked slowly up the steps of the bank. From the outside, he looked calm, almost indifferent, but inside his chest a storm was raging. His expression carried a determination that revealed he wasn't just another desperate criminal. This was the first move in a much bigger game. When he approached the counter, he deliberately glanced at the security cameras. He pulled out a gun, waved it with a controlled gesture, and told the people inside not to move. No one was harmed, because that was never his intention. He wanted only one outcome: to be arrested. Within minutes, police cars surrounded the building, and Michael surrendered without a fight. This was the path he had chosen, because prison was exactly where he needed to be. His brother, Lincoln Burrows, had been sentenced to death for the murder of the vice president's brother. In a few weeks, the execution was scheduled. Michael believed with all his heart that Lincoln was innocent. Saving him would mean doing the impossible, breaking him out from the inside. When Michael arrived at Fox River Penitentiary, the oppressive atmosphere was immediate. The walls were heavy, the looks of the guards cold, and the other inmates watched the new face with suspicion. Among them was Theodore Bagwell, known as Teabag, whose stare lingered on Michael longer than most. Inside those walls, power belonged to gangs and alliances, and Michael would need to move with careful precision. He began quietly, learning the rhythms of the place, testing the limits. He slipped small notes to his brother, reminders that he was not alone. At first, Lincoln rejected the idea. He thought it was foolish, impossible. But when he looked into Michael's eyes, he saw a calm resolve that slowly reignited his hope. In the infirmary, Dr. Sarah Tancredi noticed Michael almost immediately. He claimed to suffer from diabetes, requesting regular checkups. In truth, this was his excuse to spend more time in the medical wing, memorizing its layout, observing details that one day would be vital to the escape. Sarah sensed something unusual about him, though she couldn't name it yet. What no one knew was that Michael carried his greatest weapon beneath his skin. Etched into his body was a full set of tattoos, dark patterns that covered his torso and arms. To an untrained eye, they were artistic designs, but hidden within them was a map of Fox River, a blueprint for freedom. Every line, every curve meant something. In his cell, Michael met Sucre, Lincoln's cellmate. Sucre was open, warm, and far more trustworthy than most men in the prison. Michael treated him with respect, planting the first seeds of an alliance that would later prove invaluable. Every move Michael made seemed careful, deliberate. He kept his head down, avoided unnecessary conflicts, and yet his presence was impossible to ignore. There was something different about him, something that made the other inmates sense he wasn't like the rest. As the night fell, Lincoln sat in his own cell, staring at the walls that had become his world. He had resigned himself to death, but Michael's arrival had stirred a change. Maybe, just maybe, the impossible could be done. Meanwhile, in the quiet of his cell, Michael allowed himself the smallest smile. To the guards, to the inmates, to the world outside, he was just a reckless man who had thrown away his life in a failed robbery. But he knew the truth. The plan had already begun, hidden beneath ink and skin, waiting for the moment when all the pieces would fall into place. Mornings in Fox River began with the harsh clang of steel doors. Hundreds of inmates shuffled through the narrow corridors, voices echoing off concrete walls. But Michael Scofield moved with the same calm composure he had carried since day one. Every step he took seemed deliberate, part of a strategy only he understood. That morning, his eyes were fixed on something small, almost invisible to others, a hex key hidden within the frame of his cell's toilet. It looked like nothing, just a forgotten piece of metal, but in Michael's mind it was the first brick in a bridge to freedom. Removing it would require precision and, above all, silence. He worked quietly, slipping the tool free and finding a way to hide it from the constant eyes of guards and inmates. In this place, even the smallest object could spark suspicion. Sucre, Michael's cellmate, noticed his strange behavior. Unlike most prisoners, Sucre was good-natured and open, a man who longed for the outside world and the woman waiting for him there. He wasn't blind to Michael's secrets, but there was something trustworthy in Michael's calm demeanor. Slowly, trust began to build between them. Elsewhere in the prison, tensions rose between rival groups. The blacks, the Latinos, the white supremacists, each held their ground, ready to defend it violently. And watching from the shadows was Theodore Bagwell, Teabag, who had already marked Michael as someone unusual. His educated speech, his quiet manners, they didn't fit the mold of a hardened criminal. To Teabag, Michael looked like easy prey, but Michael avoided his gaze, refusing to be pulled into that dangerous orbit. Meanwhile, Lincoln sat in his own cell, staring at the slow crawl of time. The weight of the death sentence pressed heavier on his shoulders with every passing day. Michael's promises seemed impossible, a dream spoken through iron bars, and yet Lincoln knew his brother's mind. Michael was different. If anyone could attempt the impossible, it was him. Michael also began to test the waters with John Abruzzi, the mafia man whose influence reached far beyond the prison walls. Abruzzi was ruthless, respected, and dangerous. He also controlled something Michael needed: access to a plane. Winning his trust would take time, but Michael started to drop subtle gestures, planting the seeds of a future alliance. At the infirmary, Dr. Sarah Tancredi examined Michael again. His claim of being diabetic gave him reason to return frequently. Sarah found herself drawn to his quiet intensity, sensing there was more to him than met the eye. She had chosen this job to make a difference, but Michael was unlike the others, too calculated, too composed. She couldn't yet understand what it was about him that unsettled her. The most important detail of the day came back to that small hex key. Michael had hidden it carefully, protecting it from guards, from random searches, from curious eyes. To anyone else, it was worthless. To Michael, it was the beginning of a chain of events that would one day break locks, open doors, and carry him and his brother to freedom. As night fell, chaos rippled through the cell blocks. Fights, whispers, deals struck in the shadows. But Michael sat quietly, his mind on a world beyond the concrete walls. He touched the lines of his tattoo beneath his shirt, tracing paths only he understood. Every curve, every mark was a step closer. To the others, he was just another inmate serving time. To himself, he was already building the way out. The corridors of Fox River were heavy with noise once the morning light cut through the bars. For most inmates, it was just another day. But for Michael Scofield, every second was a piece of a larger puzzle. Today, his focus was on John Abruzzi, the man whose influence inside and outside the prison made him both dangerous and essential. Abruzzi wasn't just another inmate. He was the leader of the Italian mob inside Fox River, feared and respected in equal measure. His men controlled cells, corridors, and even had whispers of connections beyond the prison walls. For Michael, those connections mattered. If he ever hoped to break Lincoln free, he would eventually need Abruzzi's help, specifically his access to a plane. But getting close to a man like Abruzzi required more than words. Michael made himself visible at just the right times, not pushing too hard, but ensuring that Abruzzi noticed him. His calm movements, the way he carried himself differently from the rest, worked as silent invitations. Abruzzi's suspicion grew, and suspicion in this place was both dangerous and useful. To test Michael, Abruzzi set a trap. One afternoon, Michael was shoved into a cell by Abruzzi's men. The door slammed shut, and in front of him lay a knife on the floor. The message was clear: show strength or show weakness. Michael's heartbeat quickened, but his face remained composed. This wasn't just about survival. If he failed this test, he would lose any chance of gaining Abruzzi's trust. He picked up the knife, held it for a moment, then calmly set it back down. He chose reason over violence, composure over panic. That choice earned him something subtle yet important, a flicker of respect in Abruzzi's eyes. Michael had proven he wasn't reckless, and that alone made him worth watching. Still, danger circled him elsewhere. Teabag's pale eyes followed Michael constantly. His refined speech, his deliberate quietness, none of it fit the profile of an ordinary convict. To Teabag, that difference was an invitation, but Michael refused to acknowledge him, and refusal only made Teabag more determined to pull him into his twisted world. Lincoln, locked in his own cell, felt time slipping faster each day. The date of his execution crept closer, its shadow stretching long and dark. When he saw Michael moving through the yard with purpose, when he heard the whisper of his plans, Lincoln felt the first ember of hope. But it was fragile, almost drowned by the certainty of death waiting just ahead. Sara Tancredi found herself noticing Michael more as well. His excuses to visit the infirmary might have seemed routine, but there was something different in the way he spoke, in the way he looked at her, not like the other inmates, not with the same hunger or lies. There was a secret there, hidden in his quiet eyes, and Sara felt it even if she couldn't name it. That night, Michael sat in silence in his cell, tracing invisible lines across his skin where the tattoos lived. Each symbol, each hidden design was a step in the grand plan. The hex key he had hidden, the connection with Sucre, the cautious approach to Abruzzi, all of them were falling into place. To the outside world, Fox River's walls looked unbreakable. To Michael Scofield, they were nothing more than a puzzle waiting to be solved. And piece by piece, he was already unlocking it. The corridors of Fox River roared with the usual morning chaos, guards shouting orders, inmates calling out across the tiers. Michael Scofield moved through it all with calm, measured steps, his mind far from the noise around him. For him, this was not just another day. It was the moment his plan began to take physical shape. The time for preparation was ending. Now the walls themselves had to be broken. Hidden in the patterns of his tattoos was a phrase, "cute poison." To anyone else it meant nothing. To Michael it was a reminder, a code. With the right combination of chemicals, he could create a corrosive mixture strong enough to eat through the prison's pipes, opening the way toward freedom. The challenge was gathering the ingredients without drawing attention. With Sucre's help, Michael searched for opportunities in the supply areas, where cleaning agents were stored. Each bottle, each compound was another piece of the puzzle. But stealing from the prison's supplies was dangerous. Eyes were everywhere. Even Charles Westmoreland, the quiet old man with secrets of his own, seemed to notice too much. Michael had to move carefully, never giving anyone reason to question his actions. Meanwhile, his routine visits to the infirmary continued. Pretending to be diabetic allowed him to spend time near Dr. Sara Tancredi. She found herself increasingly aware of him. There was something in his composure, in the way he looked at her, that felt different from the other men. Sara couldn't name it, but she felt it. Michael, however, never lingered too long. His time in the infirmary was about observation, memorizing layouts, counting steps. Danger pressed in from another direction. Teabag. Michael's refusal to join his group had cut deeper than he realized. Teabag thrived on control, and Michael's independence made him a target. Every encounter with him was a test of patience, a reminder that one wrong move could expose everything. But Michael kept his head down, slipping away from traps with quiet intelligence. Lincoln watched from his cell, the days ticking down toward his execution. He had no clear picture of his brother's plan, but he recognized the determination in Michael's face. It was the same look he had seen when they were boys, when Michael would refuse to give up on anything. Hope was fragile, but it was there, burning faintly against the weight of the death sentence. That night, with the prison hushed in uneasy silence, Michael finally set his plan in motion. The chemicals he had hidden were brought out carefully, mixed with precision, and poured onto the metal pipes. He crouched in the darkness, listening to the hiss as the solution began to bite into steel. The smell was sharp, the sound almost alive. Every second risked discovery, but Michael's expression never changed. To anyone else, it might have seemed like madness, corroding pipes in a maximum security prison. To Michael, it was progress. The plan was no longer confined to ink and imagination. It was real now, burning into the infrastructure of Fox River. As dawn approached, he lay back on his bunk, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Around him, inmates slept, dreaming their fractured dreams. Michael, however, was already dreaming of freedom. Beneath his skin and behind the prison walls, the escape had already begun. Days at Fox River blended into one another, but for Michael Scofield, every sunrise carried him a step further into his plan. The details hidden within his tattoos had begun to reveal themselves like pieces of a map, and three names surfaced again and again: English, Fitz, and Percy. To anyone else, they were only street names. To Michael, they were the possible escape routes once the walls were behind him. But choosing the wrong path could mean disaster. He had already completed the first stages, corroding the pipes with the chemical mixture of his cute poison plan. Now his focus shifted toward confirming the outside routes. He studied every detail he could inside, waiting for the right moment to connect the puzzle pieces. John Abruzzi remained a constant shadow. Michael needed him for one reason: his access to a plane. Without that, freedom would end at the prison fence. But Abruzzi was not a man who gave trust easily. He demanded loyalty, leverage, and proof. To him, Michael was still a mystery to be solved, and until that mystery proved useful, he was expendable. Back in the cell, Sucre's presence brought a rare sense of ease. He spoke often of his fiancée, of the life waiting for him beyond these walls. Michael listened, never fully sharing the depth of his own plan, but grateful for Sucre's loyalty. In a place like Fox River, trust was currency, and Sucre's trust was worth more than any weapon. Lincoln, locked away and counting the days, felt the pressure of time pressing closer. His execution loomed like a dark horizon. He wanted to believe in his brother's genius, but fear was stronger with each sunrise. He had resigned himself once before to death, but Michael's determination reignited a fragile hope. It was a hope he was afraid to hold on to too tightly. In the infirmary, Dr. Sarah Tancredi grew more suspicious. Michael's supposed diabetes gave him reasons to visit often, but his calm questions and sharp eyes betrayed something else. She couldn't prove it, but she knew there was more to him than he let on. Still, she found herself drawn in, caught between doubt and trust. Teabag's presence was more poisonous each day. Michael's refusal to bend to join his group fueled Teabag's resentment. He thrived on ownership and control, and Michael's independence was a challenge he couldn't ignore. Each encounter with him was a reminder that danger could strike from within as easily as from the guards above. That night, Michael sat quietly, his fingers brushing the lines of his tattoos beneath his shirt. English, Fitz, Percy. Each name was more than a street. It was a decision, a gamble. He replayed the routes in his mind, tracing them from the prison outward, calculating which offered the best chance at survival. The wrong choice would seal their fate. The right one would carry Lincoln to freedom. While the rest of the prison drifted into uneasy sleep, Michael's mind remained awake, sharp, alive with possibilities. To the other inmates, he was just another quiet man doing his time. To himself, he was already on those streets, weighing the risks, seeing the future unfold. 3 names, 3 chances, and only one path to freedom. The air inside Fox River grew heavier with each passing day. Tension spread like smoke, carried by the restless anger of inmates and the iron discipline of guards. Michael Scofield moved through it with the same quiet purpose, knowing that chaos could be dangerous but also useful. That evening, sparks finally caught, and a full-scale riot erupted within the prison walls. Michael had been preparing for another step in his plan, one that required access to the infirmary. The escape route depended on a section of the prison that could only be studied from Sara Tancredi's office. But before he could make progress, the prison exploded with noise. Inmates hurled themselves at guards, doors rattled, and the sound of fists and boots echoed through every tier. Through the storm of violence, Michael's focus never wavered. He needed to get to the infirmary, no matter the chaos around him. With Sucre's help distracting the eyes that might follow, Michael slipped down corridors already filling with rage. Around him, men tore apart everything in their path, the prison trembling with their fury. Sarah had been left alone in the infirmary. The screams outside the door grew louder, and fear raced through her as she realized a group of inmates was heading her way. Just as panic began to take hold, Michael appeared. His calm voice cut through the noise, steadying her just enough to keep her from losing control. She didn't understand why he was there, but in that moment she had no choice but to trust him. Meanwhile, Lincoln remained locked in his cell, watching the riot spread like wildfire. For him, the riot wasn't an opportunity. It was another reminder of how little time he had left. His execution date loomed closer with every heartbeat, and his only hope remained Michael's impossible plan. In another wing, Teabag reveled in the chaos. He stirred the fire, pushing inmates into further violence, enjoying the collapse of order. For him, the riot was a stage, and he was eager to play his role as provocateur. Michael, however, treated it like a thin rope stretched across an abyss. One misstep would destroy everything. Inside the infirmary, Michael stole every glance he could at the layout, the pipes along the walls, the doors, the locks. Even as the riot raged, he memorized details, storing them in the architecture of his mind. Every observation was a step toward freedom. At the same time, Sarah's safety became his burden. She had no way to defend herself, and Michael stood between her and the danger breaking through the halls. As the night deepened, Fox River descended into hell. Flames licked the walls, fists pounded against steel, and the air was thick with shouts of victory and fear. The guards had lost control, and the inmates ran wild, intoxicated by a fleeting taste of freedom. Yet Michael's expression never changed. To him, the riot was only a curtain, a temporary distraction behind which the real plan advanced. By the time darkness settled fully over the prison, Michael had managed both to protect Sarah and to commit the infirmary's secrets to memory. But he knew this was only part one of the storm. Fox River had been shaken, but nothing here ever ended easily. The riot was not the climax. It was only the beginning. Fox River still trembled under the weight of the riot. What had started the day before had stretched deep into the night, turning the prison into something closer to a battlefield than a place of order. Guards had lost their grip, and inmates roamed free with a dangerous taste of power. For Michael Scofield, the violence and chaos meant only one thing: a chance to move his plan forward while protecting Sara Tancredi from the storm that surrounded them. Sara was trapped in the infirmary as the riot swelled. The pounding of footsteps and the clash of steel against steel echoed closer, and fear settled into her eyes. Michael found her just in time, guiding her to a safer corner, speaking with a calmness that stood in stark contrast to the madness outside. For the first time, Sarah felt a fragile trust forming between them, as if his steadiness was the only anchor left in the storm. The riot tore through the prison in every direction. Inmates turned on guards, on each other, on anyone who stood in their way. No one knew who was ally and who was enemy. In the middle of it all, Teabag thrived. He poured fuel onto the fire, whispering and provoking, pulling more men into violence. To him, the chaos was entertainment, a chance to tighten his grip on weaker inmates. Watching Michael protect Sarah, Teabag saw something he thought he could use: an opening, a weakness. But Michael ignored the predator's gaze and kept his focus sharp. Lincoln waited in his cell, the sounds of violence reaching him like distant thunder. Every shout, Every crash of metal only deepened his anxiety. His brother was out there somewhere, moving through the riot, and Lincoln could only wonder if this storm would end in salvation or destruction. Michael pressed deeper into the infirmary, letting his eyes memorize every pipe, every lock, every possible point of entry and exit. The chaos outside gave him cover, time to study what would later become critical parts of the escape. Yet it also carried a cost. By moving so deliberately through Sarah's domain, he revealed too much. Sarah was no fool. She knew now more than ever that Michael was not like the others. His presence here was not an accident. The night wore on, and the riot grew even more brutal. Fires lit the halls, fists struck flesh, and the shouts of victory and terror rose together in the smoke-filled air. Guards scrambled desperately, trying to hold ground until reinforcements could arrive. Michael's calm never wavered. Protecting Sarah was no longer a choice but a necessity, and in the process, he had quietly moved his plan further than anyone could guess. By the time reinforcements poured into Fox River, the prison was battered and broken. Guards wrestled inmates back into their cells, clubs cracking against skin. Orders shouted until the chaos slowly gave way to silence. Michael returned to his cell with his shirt torn, his eyes steady and his mind sharper than ever. For most, the riot had left only scars, fear, anger, exhaustion. For Michael, it left something else: progress. He had protected Sarah, memorized what he needed, and survived the firestorm. As he lay back on his bunk and stared at the ceiling, the walls of Fox River seemed less like barriers and more like obstacles already beginning to crumble. Fox River seemed quiet after the riot, but the silence was only on the surface. The tension ran deeper than ever. Guards cracked down harder. Inmates watched one another more closely, and every corner of the prison felt heavier. Michael Scofield moved calmly through it all, focused on the next step of his plan. The tunnel he intended to build had to pass through the prison's boiler room, and the man who controlled that space was an old inmate everyone called the Old Head. The Old Head had spent decades in Fox River. He knew the pipes, the furnaces, the hidden corners of the boiler room better than anyone. The guards respected him, and the other inmates left him alone. Michael understood that without this man's cooperation, progress would stall. But trust was not easily earned in Fox River, and the Old Head was not quick to hand it out. Meanwhile, Sucre found himself being pulled deeper into Michael's strange world. He noticed the late-night movements, the way Michael scribbled notes, and the way his eyes lingered on certain parts of the prison. Sucre didn't understand it all, but he felt Michael's calm certainty. In a place built on fear, that certainty was enough to make him believe. Lincoln, locked in his cell, felt the days slipping away faster and faster. The riot had not delayed his execution date. Nothing had changed except the growing pressure in his chest. Each time he saw Michael, he searched for signs of fear, but there was none. Michael carried only determination. It gave Lincoln hope, yet it also frightened him. Because if Michael failed, there would be nothing left to hold on to. Sarah, still shaken from the riot, carried the memory of Michael's presence in the infirmary. The way he had appeared, the way he had shielded her, it was burned into her thoughts. She knew his being there was no coincidence, and yet a fragile sense of trust had taken root inside her, pulling her in two directions at once. Teabag's shadow remained. He had gained influence during the chaos, and now his attention stayed fixed on Michael. He didn't know the details of what Michael was doing, but he could sense it. Michael wasn't like the others, and that difference made Teabag hungry to learn more. Eventually, Michael approached the Old Head. He spoke respectfully, carefully, never pushing too hard. The old man studied him, eyes narrowing as if searching for cracks. What he saw instead was intelligence, quiet and sharp, unlike the countless inmates he had watched over the years. The Old Head offered him hints, advice about the boiler room, but made it clear that trust had to be earned. Nothing came for free in Fox River. That night, Michael lay in his bunk, eyes tracing the invisible lines of the tattoos beneath his shirt. Pipes, tunnels, doors, exits, they came together in his mind like pieces of a puzzle. With the old head's knowledge, the picture had grown clearer. Freedom was still distant, hidden behind steel and stone, but every day the distance shortened. Inside Fox River, everyone fought for something. Some fought for survival, some for power, others for the faintest shred of hope. Michael fought for only one reason: to save his brother. And with the old head's help, that fight had just moved one step closer to victory. A new day began at Fox River, and among the shuffle of bodies in the corridors, a young face appeared. His name was David Apolskis, though it didn't take long for the inmates to give him another name, Tweener. He looked fragile, nervous, and far too naive for a place like this. Michael Scofield noticed him immediately. In Fox River, weakness was an invitation, and predators always circled when they smelled fear. It didn't take long for Teabag to mark him. The young inmate's uncertainty made him easy prey, and Teabag wasted no time asserting his control. Threats, intimidation, and false promises surrounded Tweener, pressing him into a corner. Michael watched from a distance, his calm eyes betraying the conflict inside him. His plan required focus, every ounce of attention on the path to escape. Yet his conscience resisted the idea of letting another man fall into Teabag's twisted grip. Meanwhile, Michael continued the secret work beneath the prison. The tunnel that would lead them out grew inch by inch as pipes were loosened and walls chipped away. Zoka worked beside him, loyal and resourceful, helping cover the traces of their progress. Between Michael's calculations and Suka's steady hands, the impossible began to look just a little more possible. Lincoln sat in his cell, his execution date creeping closer with every tick of the clock. The walls pressed tighter each day, the weight of time heavier than the chains on his wrists. All he had left was Michael's determination, the fire in his brother's eyes that promised salvation. Hope and fear intertwined, leaving Lincoln with no choice but to trust completely. Sarah Tancredi continued to notice Michael more with each visit to the infirmary. His calm presence, his composed manner, it separated him from the others. She was drawn to that difference, yet suspicion gnawed at her. Nothing about him seemed accidental. He wasn't just another inmate passing through her office. He was something more, something she couldn't yet name. Tweener's struggle became a stark reminder of the prison's cruel hierarchy. To survive, he would have to choose, bend to a gang's will or find protection in the shadow of someone stronger. Teabag's threats boxed him in, but when his eyes met Michael's across the yard, he caught a glimpse of another way. Michael didn't speak, but his quiet strength hinted that submission wasn't the only path. As the day stretched on, Michael's mind never left the plan. The tattoos on his body whispered secrets, every line and symbol connecting into roots and solutions only he could see. Even while chaos and fear swirled around him, his focus stayed locked on the escape. By nightfall, Tweener was no longer just the scared kid who had stumbled into Fox River. The cruelty of prison had marked him, forcing him to grow harder, to mask his weakness. Michael lay in his bunk, thoughts circling the tunnel, the risks, the ticking clock of Lincoln's execution. Around him, alliances shifted and new threats emerged. But his purpose didn't falter. The path to freedom, though still far, was getting closer, with every secret step. Time was closing in on Michael Scofield. Every move had to be flawless, because even the smallest mistake could cost Lincoln his life. The escape plan was moving forward, but there was one crucial piece still missing: John Abruzzi. Without Abruzzi and his connection to a plane, the path to freedom would remain incomplete. Abruzzi was not a man to be persuaded by simple words. His trust could not be bought or borrowed. The only bargaining chip Michael had was the location of Fibonacci, the informant who had once crippled the mob's operations and placed Abruzzi at the top of a vendetta list. For Abruzzi, Fibonacci wasn't just a name. He was unfinished business. Michael understood the weight of that knowledge, but he also knew how dangerous it would be to hand it over too soon. When Abruzzi's men cornered him, knives flashing in the dim light, Michael's composure did not falter. Surrounded by threats and violence, he played his words carefully, stalling for time, weaving diversions like a magician pulling attention away from the truth. It was in every sense sleight of hand. Michael knew that brute force would never win Abruzzi's trust, but intelligence might. Sucre remained by his side, confused by Michael's cryptic maneuvers. He wanted freedom as much as Michael did, but he couldn't understand how his cellmate could face danger with such calm. Michael only ever shared fragments with him, never the whole picture. Sucre could sense that he was part of something larger, but the full scope remained hidden behind Michael's steady eyes. For Lincoln, the days were racing forward, each one louder in its reminder of what awaited him. The guard's cold stares, the ticking clock toward execution, it was unbearable. Lincoln knew that Michael's dangerous dance with Abruzzi would decide his fate. If Abruzzi agreed, the escape might succeed. If not, the plan could crumble. In the infirmary, Sarah Tancredi continued to notice the strange distance between Michael and the rest of the inmates. He was careful, measured, and there was something unshakable about him. But that same difference fed her suspicion. He wasn't like the others, and she knew it. Whether that meant she could trust him or fear him, she hadn't decided yet. Meanwhile, Teabag hovered in the shadows, ever watchful. He saw Michael's connection with Abruzzi and knew something important was brewing. Teabag didn't need the full story to be dangerous. Just a hint was enough for him to twist it into leverage. Michael's growing plan only drew Teabag's attention closer. When night fell, Michael made his final move. He approached Abruzzi, offering him just enough to keep the man hooked. Did he truly know where Fibonacci was, or was it all an elaborate bluff? Abruzzi searched his eyes, and what he saw was conviction. For the first time, Abruzzi recognized that he needed Michael. That recognition marked a turning point. The man with the plane was no longer just an obstacle. He was part of the plan. Back in his cell, Michael rested quietly, his mind replaying the night's risks and victories. To the others, it might have looked like a dangerous gamble. To Michael, it was another carefully measured step forward. Sleight of hand wasn't just a trick. It was intelligence, patience, and nerve combined. And in this deadly game, every move counted. Within the walls of Fox River, Michael Scofield's plan was no longer just his own. What began as a solitary mission had started to grow, pulling others into its orbit. Every new ally carried value, but also danger. In prison, secrets were fragile things, and too many voices could shatter them. Michael knew the escape couldn't be carried out alone. Sucre was already by his side, loyal and steady. Lincoln, of course, was the reason for everything. Abruzzi's connections to a plane made him indispensable. But now Michael found himself bringing more names into the circle. Charles Westmoreland, the quiet old man with a reputation that stretched back decades, became one of them. Whispers about stolen millions followed him everywhere. The money didn't matter to Michael, but Westmoreland's knowledge of the prison did. His experience was priceless. Then there was C-Note. Resourceful, sharp, and always looking for leverage, he could secure supplies and access no one else could. But he was cautious, suspicious, and far from easy to trust. To win him over, Michael had to show strength, intelligence, and just enough vulnerability to convince him he was worth following. As the group began to take shape, Sucre's unease grew. The more people involved, the greater the risk. Every man added meant another mouth to keep quiet, another chance for betrayal. Sucre trusted Michael, but trusting the others was harder. Lincoln struggled to make sense of it all. His brother's plan seemed to expand every day, adding layers of complexity. For Lincoln, the goal was simple: get out before the execution date. But Michael saw it differently. To him, every piece had to fit together with mathematical precision, or the entire structure would collapse. Meanwhile, Sarah Tancredi's attention lingered on Michael. Every interaction left her with the same question. Why was he really here? He was unlike any other inmate she had ever met. Calm, deliberate, with eyes that carried secrets he refused to speak. Sarah could feel the pull between suspicion and something else, something dangerously close to trust. And in the shadows, Teabag watched. Michael's growing alliance fascinated him. He saw opportunity in it, but also threat. To Teabag, the escape wasn't just Michael's plan. It was the only possible way out. He intended to be part of it, no matter the cost. For Michael, this was the most dangerous possibility of all. Including Teabag meant inviting poison into the escape, but refusing him could be just as deadly. That night, Michael returned to his cell and studied the hidden language of his tattoos. The lines and symbols told him what he already knew. This plan was no longer about one man. It was about 7. Each of them represented a different skill, a different danger, and a different risk. Together, they formed an uneasy alliance, fragile yet necessary. In the dim light of the cell block, Michael's eyes remained steady. The plan was growing, the risks multiplying, but freedom had never been closer. To reach it, he would have to hold this dangerous alliance together, no matter how unstable it became. Behind the cold walls of Fox River, Michael Scofield's escape plan was no longer a secret kept by one man. It had become the shared burden of 7. But as the circle grew, so did the risk. Michael understood a harsh truth. There would not be room for everyone. Someone would have to be left behind. The plan had reached a point where every man served a purpose. Zerka was loyal, though his emotions sometimes clouded his judgment. Hrutzi held the key to the plane, making him indispensable. C-Note had access to supplies and information no one else could provide. Westmoreland, though quiet and reserved, brought invaluable experience and a steady hand. And then there was Teabag, dangerous, volatile, and impossible to trust, yet just as impossible to ignore. As Michael weighed the strengths and weaknesses of each member, the unease spread like smoke through the group. In a place like Fox River, trust was already fragile. Now whispers turned to questions. If one man has to be cut out, who will it be? Zuka spoke openly to Michael, pushing for Teabag to be the one. His cruelty, his unpredictability, they made him a threat to everyone. But Michael knew better than to think it was that simple. Leaving Teabag behind might turn him into a mortal enemy, and an enemy with knowledge of the plan was a risk no one could afford. Lincoln felt the weight pressing down on his brother. Every time their eyes met, he could see the silent struggle. Michael wasn't just a mastermind drawing lines on a map. He was a brother carrying the unbearable burden of saving a life. Logic battled conscience inside him, and both carried heavy costs. Sarah Tancredi noticed the distance in Michael's gaze during their short encounters in the infirmary. His mind was always elsewhere, calculating, planning. Yet despite the questions that grew in her heart, she found herself trusting him more with every passing day. That trust unsettled her almost as much as her suspicions did. When the group gathered that night, tension filled the room like thick smoke. All eyes turned to Michael. The decision was his. The silence was suffocating, every breath tight with anticipation. Michael's expression never cracked. He did not announce a name, but the look in his eyes was enough to plant seeds of doubt in each man. Later that night, lying in his bunk, Michael let his mind wander through the pathways drawn in ink across his body. The names, the routes, the risks, they all led toward a single goal, Lincoln's freedom. But he knew the truth. The road to escape would not carry them all to the end. The plan had begun with 7, but by the time it reached its conclusion, no one could predict how many would remain. Deep inside Fox River, Michael Scofield's plan had reached the point of no return. Weeks of calculations, secret digging, and fragile alliances had finally taken shape. The tunnel was real now, carved into the stone beneath their feet. Michael had measured every risk, every inch, but the one thing he couldn't control was fate itself. The work on the tunnel grew more intense, Michael, Suka, and the others chipped away at the walls with quiet precision, every strike carrying them closer to freedom. But Fox River's cold stone seemed to resist them, as though the prison itself fought to keep its secrets hidden. A single mistake, a single careless sound could bring guards swarming. That was why Michael concealed every detail so carefully, guarding the plan with the same vigilance he gave his own heartbeat. Lincoln felt the pressure in every breath he took. The date of his execution loomed nearer, each sunrise a cruel reminder of the time running out. His faith in Michael kept him steady, but the fear beneath it was impossible to silence. He knew if the tunnel failed, there would be no second chance. Hope would die with him. Charles Westmoreland, the quiet veteran of Fox River, revealed his value more and more. His calm presence helped balance the group, keeping tempers in check. Yet even on his face, worry was clear. The deeper the tunnel stretched, the greater the danger became. T-Bag hovered with his predatory grin, half admiration, half hatred. He understood that Michael's mind was their lifeline, but his twisted nature made him a constant threat. For him, joining the plan wasn't about loyalty, it was about survival, and survival for T-Bag always came at someone else's expense. Sarah Tancredi continued to notice Michael's silence, the way his eyes carried more weight than his words. The calmness that drew her in was the same thing that made her suspicious. She knew he was hiding something far greater than he admitted. Her trust in him grew, but so did the unease coiling in her chest. As the work neared its end, Michael traced the ink on his body once more, each line and mark a map guiding them forward. The tunnel had almost reached its final stage, but the closer they got, the more dangerous it became. At this point, there could be no mistakes, no hesitation. That night, when the group gathered in secret, Michael told them the truth. They were at the end of the tunnel, but what lay ahead would change their lives forever. The escape wasn't just about leaving Fox River, it meant stepping into a world where nothing would ever be the same again. Later, back in his cell, Michael lay awake, staring into the dark. Exhaustion pulled at his body, but his mind refused to rest. The tunnel was ready, freedom glimmering faintly at the edge of the shadows. But the prison was not done fighting back. Michael knew there was no turning back now. The escape would either lead them into freedom or destroy them all. After the chaos, silence once again draped itself over Fox River. But inside Michael Scofield's mind, the storm only grew stronger. The escape plan had reached a stage where every man carried a piece of the burden. Secrets were now shared, and that meant danger. In a place like this, even the smallest leak could destroy everything. Michael worked tirelessly to keep the plan hidden, but Fox River was a place where whispers spread like fire. A glance held too long, a word spoken in the wrong ear. Any of it could unravel months of work. The lines between loyalty and betrayal blurred, and Michael knew that one wrong move could end it all. The presence of T-Bag added fuel to the tension. His violence, his unpredictable nature, poisoned the group from within. Michael wrestled with an impossible choice: keep T-Bag close and risk the integrity of the plan, or cut him out and create a dangerous enemy. Either option carried ruin. Lincoln, meanwhile, felt the pressure of his approaching execution with every passing day. He trusted his brother completely, but the fragile alliances around Michael left him uneasy. The stakes were too high to gamble on loyalty. One man's mistake could seal both their fates. Charles Westmoreland, as always, provided a quiet balance. His calm steadiness grounded the group, but even he showed cracks of doubt. Years in prison had taught him a simple truth: escapes were never easy, and the price of failure was always blood. In the infirmary, Sarah Tancredi continued to wrestle with her conflicting feelings. Michael's calm demeanor pulled her closer, yet his secrets kept her at arm's length. Each time she looked into his eyes, she saw both trust and danger reflected back at her. The most chilling moment came when Michael realized the group might have a rat among them, a man feeding information to the outside. The thought of betrayal spread like ice through his veins. In Fox River, being caught was one thing, but betrayal from within was worse. A traitor could doom them all. That night, alone in his cell, Michael traced the paths inked across his skin. The lines, the pipes, the carefully mapped routes, all of it made sense. But people were not pipes. People were unpredictable. The plan might have been flawless on paper, but human weakness was something no tattoo could account for. As the prison sank back into uneasy silence, Michael knew the truth. The greatest danger wasn't the walls, the guards, or even time. The greatest danger was betrayal. If the plan was to succeed, he would have to outthink not just the system, but the very men standing beside him. At Fox River, the days dragged on, but for Lincoln Burrows, time was racing toward its end. His execution date was set and hope had almost vanished. Michael Scofield pushed forward with his plan piece by piece, but this time the news struck harder than ever. Lincoln's execution had been moved up. The announcement shook Michael to his core. The tunnel was not yet finished, the steps of the escape incomplete. Still, there was no way he would stand by and watch his brother die. He had to stretch his plan beyond its limits to do the impossible. The others felt the weight of it too. Zuka's face showed fear. C-Note's eyes were filled with doubt, and Abruzzi's voice carried anger. But no matter their unease, all of them had to trust Michael's calm resolve. Lincoln sat in his cell, the shadow of death closer than ever. The guard's cold stares reminded him daily that each sunrise could be his last. The only thing keeping him steady was the look in Michael's eyes, unshaken, determined, unyielding. That look was Lincoln's final thread of hope. For Sarah Tancredi, the news of the accelerated execution brought unbearable pressure. As a doctor, she had no choice but to witness the brutal face of justice. And yet she couldn't silence the conflict inside her. Michael's calm presence and the mystery behind his actions pulled at her heart, even as her suspicions grew. She tried to keep her distance, but each encounter left a deeper mark. Westmoreland, the quiet veteran, watched in silence. Even he could not hide the despair that crept across his face. He knew better than anyone that in Fox River, time was always the enemy. Teabag, as always, hunted for opportunities within the chaos. He understood Michael's plan was the only real chance of escape, but his loyalty was built on self-interest. Every moment with him in the group was a gamble, and everyone knew it. When the day of execution came, the prison fell into heavy silence. Guards marched with grim faces, their boots echoing down the corridors. Inmates whispered from their cells, watching the walk of death unfold. Lincoln stepped forward, his expression marked not by fear but by faith in his brother. He knew Michael would not stop fighting until the very end, and then at the last possible moment, a development changed everything. A flaw in the legal process brought the execution to a halt. Lincoln was granted a reprieve, narrowly escaping death. For the others, it felt like a miracle. For Michael, it was a breath of time, nothing more. The plan was still unfinished, but his brother was alive, and that was enough to keep moving. That night, Michael lay in his bunk, exhaustion heavy on his body, but resolve stronger than ever. His eyes traced the maps hidden in the ink across his skin. The end of the plan was close, but now he understood more clearly than ever. In Fox River, time itself was the fiercest enemy. At Fox River, days moved forward with a heavy rhythm, but this time the story turned outward, back into the shadows of the past. While the escape plan advanced in the present, the truth of how each man had ended up behind these walls came into focus. The struggles they now faced were all built upon choices made long before. Michael Scofield once lived a life defined by precision and order, using his engineering mind to build a future on stability. But Lincoln Burrows, his older brother, had always carried the weight of mistakes. Debt, bad company, and connections to the mob pulled him into a darker path. Michael had stood by him as long as he could, but eventually their lives split in different directions. Yet the bond of blood never loosened, and it was that bond that would bring Michael into Fox River with a plan to save him. Sarah Tancredi's past also came into view. She had grown up under the influence of her powerful father, a man whose political presence left heavy marks on her life. Idealism had driven her into medicine, but those ideals were constantly tested. Working at Fox River was not simply a job. It became the place where her ideals collided with her reality and where she would meet Michael, a man who quietly shifted the course of her own story. The past of Theodore Teabag Bagwell was darker still. A twisted childhood steeped in abuse and violence had forged him into the sadistic, manipulative man he became. Every cruel act, every disturbing impulse was rooted in years of anger and neglect. His presence in Fox River was not an accident of fate, but the natural consequence of a life carved by brutality. John Abruzzi's history unfolded through the lens of power. His rise through the mafia world was built on blood and fear, his empire cemented by violence. That history had earned him respect and fear alike in Fox River. But Michael's plan introduced something new, an order beyond his control, a structure that forced him to be part of something larger than himself. Charles Westmoreland's story offered a different kind of weight. Quiet, reserved, he had spent years blending into the background. Yet his past carried whispers of stolen millions and choices that still haunted him. For him, Fox River was not only a prison of steel and stone, but also the embodiment of lingering regret. This chapter revealed more than crimes or labels. It uncovered the human lives beneath them, their flaws, their regrets, and the mistakes that chained them here. Michael's plan might have been an intricate puzzle of blueprints and timing, but the men around him were bound together by something far less tangible: fate. In the dim corridors of Fox River, echoes of the past shaped the present. Each inmate walked with the weight of his own story on his shoulders, and at the heart of it all was Michael, who carried not only his brother's life but the threads of many lives intertwined with his. Within the walls of Fox River, Michael Scofield's plan moved forward, but the calm face he showed to the world could no longer hide the weight pressing down on him. Every step toward escape tested not only his intelligence, but also his endurance. This chapter became a trial of his resilience as much as his mind. Suspicion had begun to circle around him. Guard Brad Bellick, in particular, sensed that Michael was different. His routines, his quiet demeanor, something didn't fit. To tighten control, the decision was made to isolate him under the guise of mental instability. Michael was removed from his cell block and placed in solitary confinement within the psychiatric ward, known among inmates as the J-Cat. There, stripped of allies and distractions, Michael was left alone with his thoughts. Time slowed to a crawl in the small dark space. The ink on his body became his only companion. He closed his eyes and traced the lines in his mind, forcing himself to remember every corridor, every pipe, every symbol of the escape. Yet with each hour in isolation, fear gnawed at him. The fear that his memory might falter, that the plan etched into his skin could slip from his mind. Lincoln raged at the situation. He could feel time closing in, his execution approaching, and the thought of Michael being silenced and cut off terrified him. He tried to reach his brother, but Fox River's rules left him powerless. His frustration grew into desperation, for without Michael, the road to freedom seemed to vanish. Among the others, tension mounted. Zucker, Abruzzi, and C-Note all understood that without Michael's leadership, the plan was nothing. The alliance frayed under the pressure. Teabag, ever opportunistic, saw Michael's absence as a chance to tighten his grip on the group. He whispered, manipulated, and watched, waiting for the right moment to seize control. But even as they distrusted him, none of the others could deny that the balance was slipping. In the infirmary, Sarah Tancredi read the reports about Michael's supposed mental break. Doubt filled her heart, but not in the way the guards intended. She didn't believe he was truly unstable. Her instincts told her otherwise. Each time she had looked into his eyes, she had seen clarity, intelligence, and something more, a purpose. Whatever Michael was hiding, madness wasn't it. Inside the J-Cat, Michael fought his own battle. The silence pressed against his ears. The shadows stretched too long, but his resolve burned through it. He reminded himself why he was here, Lincoln. That single word, that single name anchored him in the darkness. When he finally returned to the others, exhaustion was etched on his face, but determination still lit his eyes. He had endured the isolation, but the experience left him with a chilling reminder. Fox River was not only a prison of steel and stone, it was also a prison of the mind. And if he was to succeed, he would have to conquer both. At Fox River, Michael Scofield's plan had grown more intricate, and with that complexity came greater danger. Every detail of the escape had to align perfectly. But secrecy was fragile in prison, and the tunnel Michael and Suka had been digging was now at a critical stage. One mistake, one miscalculation, and months of work could be exposed. Michael realized they needed a distraction, something to pull the guards' attention away. He found his opportunity in the poker games held among inmates, games that were more than simple gambling. Within Fox River, poker was a battleground for influence, respect, and power. Michael, with his calm intelligence, decided to step into the arena. At the table, Michael faced more than cards. Every hand dealt was a test of perception, a silent clash of wills. He played not for chips, but for time. Every bluff and calculated move gave Suka and the others the cover they needed. Yet his performance didn't go unnoticed. Teabag, sharp and predatory, watched him closely, sensing there was more behind Michael's calm exterior than a simple game. Meanwhile, Suka pressed on with the tunnel. Alone, the responsibility weighed heavily on him. Each strike of metal against stone risked drawing attention, the sound echoing too loudly in his ears. But thoughts of Maricruz, the woman waiting for him outside, pushed him forward. For Suka, freedom wasn't just about survival, it was about love. Lincoln, counting down the days to his execution, grew restless. To him, Michael's hours spent at the poker table seemed reckless. With time running out, every moment mattered. But Michael's eyes carried certainty. He knew this wasn't just a gamble. It was strategy. Sara Tancredi, caught between suspicion and trust, found herself drawn deeper into Michael's presence. Each encounter with him left her unsettled. His composure, his intelligence, it made him stand apart. And while it fascinated her, it also reminded her of the secrets he was clearly keeping. The turning point came at the poker table, when Michael made his boldest move, a perfect bluff. With nothing in his hand, he stared down men who lived their lives on manipulation and force, and they folded. It wasn't about winning money. It was about proving that in Fox River, intelligence could be sharper than any blade, and deception could be more powerful than brute strength. By the end of the night, Michael returned to his cell exhausted, but a quiet triumph flickered across his face. The bluff had worked. He had bought the time they needed, just enough to push the tunnel further. Fox River remained as suffocating as ever, but in the darkness, Michael's mind continued to carve a path toward freedom. Inside the grim walls of Fox River, Michael Scofield's plan pressed forward, but a new obstacle stood in the way. The escape route passed through a crucial point, the office of Warden Pope. Within that office lay a key, an object small in size but immense in importance. Without it, freedom was impossible. Securing that key became Michael's new mission. To achieve it, he turned once again to his greatest weapon, his intelligence. Michael knew Pope carried scars of regret from his past, wounds that made him vulnerable. With calm words and careful gestures, Michael deepened the trust between them. By offering help and showing sincerity, he gained the access he needed. Each encounter brought him one step closer to the warden's office and to the key itself. Meanwhile, Sara Tancredi grew more suspicious. Michael's eyes wandered too often. His questions carried hidden meanings. She couldn't deny the way he unsettled her. Her instincts told her he wasn't just another inmate, and yet another part of her heart urged her to trust him. His quiet presence, his determination, it pulled her closer even as doubt lingered. Lincoln's days slipped away. The date of his execution loomed ever nearer, and every tick of the clock weighed heavy. Fear did not rule his face. Instead, it was impatience. His faith in Michael never wavered, but the urgency of time gnawed at him. He knew the plan was nearing its end, yet the shadow of death hung close. T-Bag, ever watchful, noticed Michael's attention on the warden's office. His suspicion sharpened like a blade. To T-Bag, every secret was a chance for leverage, every risk an opportunity. He watched Michael carefully, looking for cracks in his calm mask, ready to exploit them. But Michael had no choice. He had to keep moving forward no matter the danger. At last the moment came. Michael entered Pope's office, nerves racing beneath his steady surface. Every second mattered. His eyes scanned quickly, his hands precise. And then there it was, the key. He moved with care, slipping it into his possession as though the entire prison were holding its breath. In that instant, the lines hidden in his tattoos became reality. Word of Michael's success rippled quietly among those closest to him. Westmoreland, wise with years of prison life, shook his head in muted awe. He understood how dangerous such a step was, but he also knew it was necessary. Few men had dared so much within Fox River's walls. That night, Michael returned to his cell, exhaustion etched into his features. Yet when he opened his hand and felt the key resting in his palm, his resolve solidified. Another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. The corridors of Fox River remained as threatening as ever, but the path forward glowed a little clearer. Freedom, still distant, now felt closer than it ever had. At Fox River, time had run out. For Michael Scofield and his team, there was no turning back. Months of digging, planning, and careful calculation all led to this moment. Tonight, they would either taste freedom or remain trapped forever. Michael's expression carried an unshakable resolve. He had replayed every step of the escape in his mind countless times, every detail memorized, every risk accounted for. But execution depended on precision. Each man had to move at the right time in the right place. Suka, Abruzzi, C-Note, and T-Bag, all of them prepared in their own way, their motivations different but bound together by this night. For Lincoln, this was the final trial of fate. The shadow of his execution loomed so close he could almost feel its breath. His faith in Michael was absolute, yet fear lingered deep inside. Fox River had a way of turning even the best-laid plans into ashes. Sara Tancredi, caught between duty and conscience, struggled with the weight pressing down on her. Her father's expectations, her role as a doctor, and the pull of Michael's quiet determination all collided. Every word Michael had spoken, every look exchanged left an imprint on her, and though she didn't fully realize it yet, she held a crucial piece of the plan in her hands. The inmates began moving, each step carrying them closer to the point of no return. Down in the tunnel, the air was thick, every sound magnified. The scrape of tools against stone echoed like thunder in their ears. With every inch they carved, freedom drew nearer, but so did discovery. T-Bag's sly grin revealed what everyone already knew. His loyalty was never to the group, only to himself. Michael guided them with precision, not as an engineer this time, but as a conductor leading a symphony. Every breath, every pause, every silent gesture mattered. Tonight was not only the test of his intellect, but also the measure of his nerve. Meanwhile, suspicion grew among the guards. Brad Bellick, restless and sharp-eyed, sensed that something was off. Little clues began to surface, threatening to unravel everything. For Michael and the others, time slipped away faster with every heartbeat. As the night deepened, the men clung to a single truth: freedom. Sweat dripped, hearts raced, and hope burned in the shadows. At the end of the tunnel, a chance awaited them, a fragile opening that could change everything. The night closed on the edge of destiny. Every preparation, every sacrifice had led to this one moment. Fox River's walls, built to contain, were about to face a challenge unlike any before. Tonight, history would be written within its cold stone corridors. Night fell over Fox River, heavy with the weight of destiny. For Michael Scofield and his team, there was no turning back. After months of planning, digging, and waiting, the escape was no longer a dream, it was happening tonight. Everything depended on precision. One misstep could destroy them all. Michael left his cell with calm determination written across his face. Beneath that stillness, his mind raced, calculating every second as though it were currency. With Lincoln, Sucre, Abruzzi, C-Note, and Teabag by his side, he knew each man had to follow the plan exactly. In the shadows of the prison, every movement mattered. The tunnel lay before them, dark and narrow, carved by desperation and hope. As they slipped inside, their breaths grew shallow. Each crack in the stone, each drop of water echoing through the passage felt like a warning. The risk of discovery pressed against their chests, yet Michael's steady eyes pushed them onward. He had brought them this far, and his presence was the anchor holding the group together. Sara Tancredi, away from the chaos of the tunnel, faced her own battle. Her father's influence, her responsibilities as a doctor, and her conflicted feelings for Michael weighed heavily on her. She sensed that what Michael was hiding was more than just a secret. It was a purpose that stretched beyond himself. And on this night, her decision, one made in a heartbeat, would shape the fate of the entire escape. Meanwhile, guard Brad Bellick prowled with suspicion gnawing at him. The smallest details seemed out of place, feeding his instincts that something was wrong. His unease grew with every passing moment, and unknowingly his watchfulness tightened the race against time. For Michael and the others, every second became a countdown. As the moment of escape arrived, tension among the inmates reached its peak. Teabag's sly menace, C-Note's wary eyes, Sucre's desperate hope for love, Abruzzi's cold resolve, all of it collided in the suffocating walls of the tunnel. Michael had no choice but to rely on each of them, though he knew the danger they carried. Then at last the faint glow of light appeared at the end of the passage. For a fleeting second, freedom felt real. Hearts pounded as adrenaline surged through their veins. The outside world was closer than it had ever been, yet the hardest part still lay ahead. For Michael, this was the culmination of every tattooed line, every sleepless night, every calculated risk. His plan was no longer theory. It was alive, moving, and breathing with every step forward. The episode closed on that razor's edge. As the group pressed forward through the tunnel, the weight of Fox River still behind them, and the uncertain promise of freedom just beyond reach. Time had stopped, and the future hung in the balance. The plan that had begun within the cold walls of Fox River finally reached its final act. Michael Scofield and his team emerged from the depths of the tunnel, stepping into the world beyond the prison walls. But freedom was far from secure. The outside world carried dangers just as relentless as the stone and steel they had left behind. Every breath of open air came with the weight of pursuit. Michael led the group with calm precision, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. For Lincoln, this was the rewriting of destiny. Death had stalked him for days, but now freedom flickered before him, fragile yet real. Sucre's heart beat with only one thought, Maricruz. Each stride carried him closer to the woman he loved. Abruzzi marched with visions of power, eager to reclaim his position in the world beyond. And Teabag, with his crooked smile, revealed that his loyalty had never been to the group but to his own survival. At first, the escape moved with the smoothness of a carefully crafted design. Every step, every maneuver echoed Michael's meticulous planning. But outside, new challenges rose. The terrain was rough, the night heavy with uncertainty, and betrayal lurked in every shadow. Behind them, sirens wailed, cutting through the darkness like a cruel reminder that freedom was fleeting. Meanwhile, Sara Tancredi made the choice that would forever alter her life. Despite her father's pressure, she chose to trust Michael. By leaving the doors unlocked, she handed the fugitives their chance. Her decision was not born of logic, but of faith and love. As the group pushed forward, tensions boiled. Teabag's treachery came to the surface, widening the cracks between them. Though they shared the same desperate run, each man carried a different dream in his heart. Michael's greatest test was not the guards or the fences, but holding together men whose loyalty was always uncertain. Lincoln's heart surged with the promise of freedom, but Michael's mind remained cold and calculating. He knew the truth. Escaping the prison did not mean they were free. The walls were behind them, but the real battle was only beginning. The night echoed with pursuit, the sirens, the barking of dogs, the shouts of guards chasing them across fields. The fugitives broke into the open land, their feet striking grass instead of concrete. For a fleeting moment, the air tasted like freedom, yet each breath carried the fear of capture, a reminder that liberty was as fragile as the night itself. The episode ended with the men scattering into the darkness. Fox River was behind them, but their paths diverged into the unknown. They had crossed the wall, but fate still bound them together. Michael's plan had carried them this far, but now their lives would be written by the choices they made beyond the prison gates.